April 52. It's 8:33 a.m. and we are taking up H446, an act relating to miscellaneous natural resources and development subjects. And I'd like to welcome to the chair our first guest, Chair Haskell from the Natural Resources Board. So please join us. Good to see you.
Yes, good morning.
So just to remind anyone watching and the committee, 446 is ANR's miscellaneous bill. When Commissioner Walk was in roughly a week or 10 days ago, he mentioned that he believed that the NRV had updates to some of its language that it would like to see move forward and so this is an appropriate vehicle to carry other language related to the NRV. So Ms. Haskell, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And good morning, Chair Bray and committee members. For the record, I am Sabina Haskell and I'm the chair of the Natural Resources Board. With me today via Zoom is Allison Stone, our general counsel. And I thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback to you on H446. H446 provides us the opportunity to make some necessary technical corrections. And therefore, I would like Allison to walk you through our few comments.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Stone. We can't hear you yet, unfortunately. I know that feeling. Don't worry.
We've all had it.
The only thing amongst the many things we've seen people try when they're in
Volume? No, the volume's up.
Once in a while, I've seen someone plug in and plug out their earbuds.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
That was it.
Okay. Faulty headphones. Sorry about that. So the changes that, sorry, let me just close this notification. So the changes that are in the current version of the bill, we do support. They're pretty straightforward. I think most of them are just changing the dates that are needed for notice to be consistently 14 days. And this is a couple of them are changed from 10 days, for example, for an Act 250 disclosure statement to be provided to 14 days. Notice for hearings for major applications being changed from 10 to 14 days. And this is basically intended to align with our new online application system so that, which doesn't distinguish between calendar days and business days. And it also just gives a bit more time. So those I think are pretty straightforward. I did want to flag that there were some other changes that were in a previous version of this technical changes bill that I inherited from my predecessor that were also similarly intended to make the statute line up with our new application. And one of them included reducing the amount. There's in 6083, 10 VSA 6083, there's some language that requires provision, for example, of 4 copies of a plan and a certification about notice. And so we had proposed those changes simultaneously to sort of line up with current practice and what makes the most sense when there's an online application fee that has, or application system rather, that has, we have the ability to use to, for example, give notice to statutory parties that we keep a list of. So I could provide that other language that got dropped out of this bill if that would be helpful, but certainly the language that's in there that we do support.
So I'm not very successfully multitasking here. I'm trying to look. Do we have that language from you? Just want to make sure that, especially towards the end of a session, it's always good to have from the requesting party any changes in writing so that we don't have any kind of editorial slips in terms of where a date changes or where language inserts or any language that's being struck. So if we don't have that, can you send that over to us? And that way
Yes.
we'll be accurate in any edits we bring into the bill.
Absolutely, will do.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
That's
That's
it.
that's all I have. Yeah, short and
Okay.
sweet.
All right, well, that sounds,
Okay.
I'm gonna hesitate to say easy, but it does sound on the easy side. All right, so if you'll send us those edits, that will be helpful.
Great.
And thank you.
Thank you.
And Chair Haskell, anything else on your to-do list?
Not for H 446.
Okay.
No, and I know we'll be back here
Yeah,
picking up 492 in an
Yeah.
hour or so.
right. And we might be getting there sooner rather than later. So
Well, down in the schedule
Oh,
for
right, okay.
9:30, I don't know.
we'll have to wait. All right. We have other things we'll do in between. All right, if you're all set, and
Yep.
thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Stone. We'll watch for an email. If you could send it to me and to Judith Meehan, that way we'll both have it. And also, actually, so 4, 6. Could you also include Michael O'Grady on the CC because he is drafter?
Yes, will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
See you in
An hour.
50 minutes or
Yeah.
so, right?
Okay, so with that, Mr. Beeling, good morning and welcome.
I'm sorry, what are we shifting to?
At the table. We'd love to get an update from A&R,
Oh, same topic?
same
Yes.
topic.
Sorry. Okay.
Good morning.
Hear about any late breaking changes or,
Yeah, I just wanted to, I had emailed the chair last night about the proposed change that we had to 10 VSA, section 1259B, that's the 1,000 gallon per day discharge aspect of the statute. We had some conversations with members of the environmental community, and we're trying to kind of work out some language and decided at the end of the day, it was getting too convoluted. And we decided just to pull that proposed change for this session. I think we're gonna revisit it. We still think it's something like what we proposed is probably appropriate, but rather than try to work out a compromise, it wasn't working. So we decided at this stage of the game, just to withdraw that proposal.
which proposal?
This is the 1,000 gallons, so the statute is 10 VSA, section 1259B. It's a prohibition of discharges above 1,000 gallons per day from a wastewater system in a Class A, near Class A waters. And we had some proposals, basically trying to take into account the fact that, systems have improved dramatically since that statute was drafted. And we think there could be more flexibility along those lines. But in trying to kind of work out a compromise or something that they would be happy with, it started to get too, we were worried about unintended consequences. So we decided, look, let's just put this aside for now. It's been in place for a long time. We can come back. I do think we're going to end up doing something, but just not this session. We didn't think it was appropriate to try to get it done at this point in time.
Well, it makes sense to me that the thresholds could be revisited because of the improvements in technology since the original statute was passed. And then what seems like it really sort of behind the scenes was used as a way to limit development.
Right.
So it's that second role in terms of how it impacts development.
Right.
It's not really so much about septic, but controlling development. It seems
Exactly.
like it's the thorny issue. And I was hearing concerns especially about higher altitude systems or fragile streams, soils, et cetera. Okay. Well, I think there's probably wisdom in slowing down and getting it right because it's important for everyone. it's too bad that for the state parks that we're hoping to expand capacity, that it means they
All right.
will not be able to do so until we sort this out. Although some people like to keep state parks small, other people would like to make them available to more people. There's no simple answer.
Right, so this will be continued, but I think for now we decided that discretion was a better part of that. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, any committee questions, et cetera?
Thank you.
And
See you
can
in
you,
person.
See you first.
can you give me that section number again? I just want to make
So
sure.
it's 10 VSA, section 1259D, as in David.
Because I'm not good at looking at the bill and paying attention to someone, so I wasn't sure what page number to get. Well, thank you for the testimony, and again, the same bill, so I will forward your email on to Mr. O'Grady so that we can look at drafting an amendment that picks up what the NRB is brought forward and what you're bringing forward. That should be, I think, our final tuning on the bills. That's why I haven't heard from many other parties about requests to alter. Right.
All right,
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all in person.
Yeah, good to see you.
Have a great day. The sun's out.
It's nice.
Coming down into Montpelier, or so coming down into a cloud.
Yeah.
Oh, really interesting.
All right, so
Until 9:30.
All right.
well, so there's one.
One minor item in between.
So, yeah, thank you, Mr. Beeling.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So since that was faster than I realized, I thought that the
It
NRB
happens.
had
It happens.
more new language to bring, not just edits what we already have. But we have a chance to talk about, and we could take a break if people need to do stuff, but on 492, sorry, so we're doing 492 next, which is the governance bill, which is, I met with Chair Sheldon this morning, and for her, this is their top priority now.
492, the
The
government,
reorganization of governance for the Natural Resources Board. So that's what Ms. Haskell is coming back to talk to us about. And
Thank you.
you.
Pertains to government records.
Jude, do you have a copy of, I think I put it in the folder, 446, do we have hard copies of that?
446.
Mr. Chair, do you have a sense of whether or not,
I went around to everybody's
Pile,
pile and pulled it out. I didn't figure out.
that's our, mine are usually, not even foldering them, that's all right, I'll get hold of a copy.
No, I can get you one simply.
I have one right here if you want to just use mine.
Of 446.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
on, because he's
Great.
on, yeah.
That, the edits,
Well, that's
your
the
edits?
A and R edits and that's
You want
the
this one?
bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So, Mr. Chair, do you know if their work happens to be a collaboration between the House and the administration, or is this something that,
On 492.
yeah, on the priority for Rep. Sheldon?
Right.
and others?
So, so we're still broadcasting.
Yeah, sure.
My understanding, I mean, I haven't inquired closely of the administration. My sense is, they have some serious concerns about the bill as we're gonna see it. There's also, just so people know, that there's discussion in the House about combining bills, and putting 492 on another bill as well, including something we have sent them. So I've always found it a little troubling if there's a bill with public concerns on it, that we would be vulnerable to having that attached to one of our bills. But we'll see. There's time for adjustment.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll hear about it.
Okay.
It is the chair's top priority. Representative Bongart's going to come in to present it, so we'll hear about it. I know that the chair said they've been working on this issue for 5 years, and they.
5 years.
Since you were both on that commission. I think it was wasn't reforming governance one of the.
Yeah, but
It's a blur now.
When you were a
it is a
child.
blur. It was ages ago.
Years ago.
But wow. So things that are usually people's top priorities, usually they get them out sooner.
Everything in its time.
Everything in its time.
So we'll hear.
But sure, we can have sounds
Hear
good.
about that. But since we have a little bit of extra time, I did want to check in with the committee. We're scheduled to vote the clean heat standard later this morning. And the concern was raised to me yet again by Secretary Moore about provision in 715. And there is, so I'll read it to you as currently written. If you want to look in the bill, it is, and actually this printout is one behind, but it's in the section that defines clean heat credits. And it currently reads, a clean heat measure delivered to a customer qualifying for a government-sponsored low-income energy subsidy shall qualify for clean heat credits required by the earlier section. So this was the whole question of could this lead to quote unquote double counting, which is a troubling term because people mean two different things, but they use the same term for.
Double counting, double counting.
Yes, exactly. So the discussion we had earlier and what the Secretary of A&R's preference would be to strike that section. One of the discussions we had was to refer the question to the PUC and say, in a manner somewhat analogous to when we started the renewable energy standard, and both the electric utility and Efficiency Vermont were both providing subsidies and work effort to get one customer to put in a cold climate heat pump. They each wanted to claim the savings associated with that heat pump in full for themselves. And that would have been perfect double counting. Same heat pump counted by two different entities. So there was a docket at the PUC that evaluated how to parse the credits. And I don't remember the details of what they came up with, but it's more than a year of work to sort that issue out. I do feel like we're setting up a similar, not exactly the same thing. Because in this case, a tier 3 obligation is to reduce greenhouse gases, and the obligation is that the utility spend whatever money it needs to achieve a certain level of greenhouse gas reduction, and that's that program. Entirely separate from it is if you instruct whatever that measure was, in the future, it would also be eligible to earn clean heat credits, and they live in a completely different system. So that's why I think council is saying to us, there is no double counting. There's only clean heat credits over here, and there's greenhouse gas reductions over here in tier 3. Some people are saying, yes, but it's the same physical act. Putting in one cold climate heat pump leads to credits meeting obligations, credits, whatever you want to call it. It's two different programs. Will we undermine, will we achieve less because one step will get 2 check marks and we'll do less work because both parties got credit? I think that's my best understanding of what the second version of double counting is all about.
What do you get to do with the credits when you buy them?
So that is gonna be worked out through the order, the rule, but
How do we explain to our colleagues what you do with the credits?
I would
The
say
rule is
there's gonna be,
attempting to do.
there'll be an exchange. So one way I think of it is there's a clean heat credit bank, and you could sell your credits back to this bank and get cash. You don't have to.
Before you kill someone to steal their clean heat credits, I want to know what the charge is going to be.
I'll be the first one he kills. Yeah,
Embezzlement, theft, securities fraud, what,
Yeah,
I'm asking this.
the analogy's making it hard for me to figure out how to even answer that, but
What are we gonna tell our colleagues?
can we tell our colleagues, well, there are people who will need clean heat credits, right? Anyone who's selling in an appliance or a fuel that has a carbon footprint. And frankly, that's everyone, right? Because right now the grid's not 100% clean. So even electric powered clean coal tar heat pumps have some carbon footprint. Because out there on the grid, there's natural gas being burned until a utility has 100% clean portfolio. Anyway, there are going to be obligated parties who will need credits. You could sell to them, or someone could say, I'm not interested in being in this business. I think there's going to be a clearinghouse for banks.
I think Senator McDonald, I may be misinterpreting it, but I tend to agree. I mean, what is, hey, this is really what you're getting. And that's where I think we just have to keep honing that.
If you're gonna describe something that has been designed, so before you start, you gotta put some sort of a stake in the ground to explain the thing. You know, we keep defining parts of this system by referring to other parts, but what's the system?
I would say that when you install a measure that reduces emissions, you will receive credits that have money attached, you will receive a subsidy.
And this, the person that writes you the check or the entity that writes you the check will draw on a bank account from where?
Well,
Where's the money come from?
so the bank will have every party is selling a fuel that obligates them to purchase credits will be going to the bank to buy them, and they have to. So the bank ends up exchanging. Yeah, I know.
So when I show up with my truck and I buy 1,000 gallons of fuel, I pay $1,000 plus $10 extra, and the $10 extra goes into this bank, and I get to take my $1,000 of fuel and sell it. But I actually wrote a check for $1,010, and $10 is in this bank, and then that's used to provide cash for the people who have earned the credits through some activity.
Okay, well, I can see this is gonna have to work on this.
I don't understand it.
Okay.
I can't explain it, so I don't understand.
Okay, so on the fuel delivery side, let's say that a fuel dealer decides 100% of, they have an obligation, right? For every gallon of fossil fuel they sell to you, to offset it with a certain amount of clean heat credits, right? They get that, depending on the carbon intensity of the fuel sold, the PUC assigns them an obligation to purchase. It's like an offset, right? And so now your fuel dealer says, well, I'm gonna, however much I have to pay for those clean heat credits, I'm gonna add that cost to the cost of your fuel. That's like the most, that's one scenario. I think that's what is the scenario most worrisome for people, but I'll just stick with that because it's the simplest one. So say they sold you 1,000 gallons of fuel, the clean heat credits required to offset that anticipated emissions from burning it, is $10. So they might sell you the 1,000 gallons and add $10 to it.
So you sell me 1,000 gallons of fuel and it costs me $1,010 to.
Right. Now the fuel dealer now they take their $10, they go to the bank, the clean heat credit bank, and they buy the 10 credits they needed to have sold you that fuel. That's their obligation, and that's where they get the credits.
I'm looking at my 8th grade students saying, when's this class gonna be over? Because I don't understand anything. And how am I gonna pass the test? I hope it's multiple choice. Yeah.
I'll take true and false.
A, B, C, D.
I just don't want essay.
Chris,
I get
this
it.
is a conceptual thing
Right. Well,
that either folks upstairs have to trust that we know what we're talking about and they're not gonna be behind a podium or having to answer their competitors' campaign questions and sit there looking really dumb. So
So I appreciate the question, and gonna have to come up with a clear, simple way of describing what happened. But my clear, simple way of describing what happened is that depending upon how much pollution you're gonna create by selling someone something, you're going to have an obligation as the person who sells that thing, whether it's a heat pump or fuel to a fuel tank in the cellar, oil, there'll be an obligation that goes along with it. And you'll have to go buy the clean heat credits that offset
you being,
the person selling the product is
the
gonna.
heat pump,
Yeah.
the installed heat pump.
And part of this is strict because the PUC is deciding a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, but they, in theory, understand what we are unable to explain. And they will design the thing that will work, but we can't explain what we're asking them to design.
Well, okay, so let me take it, so we'll just keep iterating, so we feel like there's something straightforward to say. When you sell any way of heating a space that causes emissions, the person selling that technology or fuel will have an obligation to help offset those emissions.
So the stake in the ground is every time we burn a fossil fuel, we send heat and greenhouse gas into the atmosphere.
Right,
And
that's
our intention is to make it more expensive for anybody that does that? Is that how we're explaining it? If you're gonna go and burn this crap and put it into the air, you're gonna pay a pollution fee for doing it? Is that what we're saying?
well, I don't know that we're saying it that way. You could say that there's,
You can put it into
but it is, well,
bland language later, but is that what we're doing?
I would say on some level, yes, you could say if the amount of pollution you're creating will create an obligation to help invest in the system that's gonna let people stop doing it. So if you kept burning, if you never changed, no one knows this for sure because they haven't worked out the system. But sort of the worst case scenario, you say, I don't want to change a single thing in my house. You could see the price of fuel rise. We don't know what the cost of tax will be. And that's because if your fuel dealer says, I'm just passing on that cost to you entirely.
So when John McClowery says, we got a fuel tax coming along, carbon tax, I think John's correct. Yeah, that's what we're doing, isn't it, what we're doing?
I would say that it's right. There is, in essence, you're building into the price of the fuel cost to help reduce the emissions.
By paying this thing to pollute, you use a different word, to burn this fossil fuel, which is doing our atmosphere and our future damage, you're gonna pay extra. And you don't have to necessarily change your behavior, but you're paying extra, and that extra money is gonna be used to hire people who are interested in reducing the amount they use.
I'd say yes.
And then someone will say, well, how's that gonna work? And then you would get into the business of the credits, but you know, I don't, if I were to think how I would teach this course to people
It's a
that are,
great way to think about it.
they're trying to understand it.
And so for the person who says, well, I don't like that, I don't want to be paying extra,
Well, then
then
get a blanket for Christ's sake.
what
Well, the other way to start this could be,
you,
is maybe, what's the problem we're trying to solve?
Right.
And that's another, what is the problem that this bill is trying to solve, and this is how it's doing it? And that is, I find it's always my go-to
Yeah.
with everything in this building.
Right.
This is the problem that's out there, and let me tell you the ways that we're gonna deal with it.
so I would like to try that one. But back here, for the person who says, I'm getting kind of annoyed with this, that I'm paying something extra on my fuel bill, which is not known yet that will happen. But if it were, you could also say, well, there is this program through your utility, through Efficiency Vermont and other parties that will help you switch to an appliance that allows you to no longer pay.
And you'll be better off and have lower bills than you would have, and you won't be polluted.
The social benefit is that you're not polluting. The personal benefit is that you may well see lower bills because heat pumps are much more cost-effective ways of creating heat than burning fuel, the old-fashioned.
Well,
And
they use, and you can operate a heat pump with renewable power,
Right.
whereas you've been heating your house with fossil fuel power.
Non-renewable power.
And our goal is to
Right, we have,
use fossil fuels the way we used to.
and part of why we're well positioned to do this is we have the cleanest grid in the United States right now. So that when you use electricity, it's not perfectly clean, but we're at, I think, 64% renewable. So 2/3 basically of your power is already carbon free. We're on track. I would love to see us accelerate the pace over time to get to 100% carbon free, maybe by 2030. At that point, if you're running your heat pump, you're not polluting.
So what you're doing is introducing new vocabulary words, new concepts like grid, and assuming that people understand them instead of saying, okay, now we have to go understand the grid. I'm being overly
Yeah, no, it's good.
critical, but
You
you can't just pile them on a bunch of terms and say, trust us, and then have people go home to their districts to debate their opponents
Yeah.
and not have the ability to convey to the voters what it is that is good about it.
So to Senator Campion's question, I think, so I'm happy that we're having this discussion because it has to make sense to everybody. The problem we're solving is climate change is and a real world present day danger.
Oh, yeah, right.
And we have an obligation to ourselves and others to stop polluting, to stop following our own nest. The way we're living here now, it's like we're the renters that are burning the furniture. So
That's one of the problems. But we also have, I would say, and this is the one that's gonna is these fuel prices are
well,
all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm,
Wouldn't be so bad if fuel, if we could predict accurately the future
Right.
fuel prices, it would be, make things a lot easier, but my goodness, we're doing this on a roller coaster at the same time.
I can't remember I've asked Senator Pearson and he couldn't remember. I'm gonna have to do a little research. But on the Senate floor 2 or 3 years ago, he said the average Vermonter, and I don't know what he meant by that. It might be average low income Vermonter. That's something like $600 or $800 in the bank. And so with recent fuel spikes, that's about 1.5 deliveries that clears out their savings when fuel prices spike. So many Vermonters have no capacity.
So that's number two.
Their
Number
fuel
three, I would say,
double.
is how much are we getting of our fuel from out of state?
Right. So
You always gotta go
All
back
of
to the stake in the ground. You can't just move from subject to subject. They always have to focus back on something you've established in the beginning. But who's gonna be screwed the most if we don't do anything?
It's a great way to think about it.
If we do nothing, who are the people, which members of our community are gonna be in a worse position?
The world's population,
Pardon?
the world's population as a whole.
but more locally, I'd say low income Vermonters.
So how come
Because they'll
the
still-
opponents get away with saying you can't do this because you're gonna hurt low-income Vermont? How do they get away with saying that?
I
They're
would
the ones
say
that are getting screwed now.
Right.
there's a certain, how do they get away with it? I'd say because most people can't really, it's very hard to imagine a system that we don't have saving you money on your fuel. The best analogy I can think about what we're proposing to do is the creation of an efficiency Vermont, where people said, what, you're gonna charge me more and I'm gonna save? There was a vast amount of skepticism that
Did you believe that when you first heard it?
I felt like efficiency, it was a modest charge and if it led to efficiency, sure.
You believed it? When they first told you about
Well,
efficiency
I was-
Vermont, they could charge you more and it was gonna save you money. You believed that? Or how long did it take for you to, when did you begin to go, yeah, I believe that, or damn, great, look at this.
Right.
Look at it, it is, electricity rates are going down. How long did it take?
Well, it took years for electricity rates to go down, right? We were the highest in New England and now we're the second lowest. We reduced our ISO charges because we're smaller percentages than load. But I'd say the way that people first started to notice was that things like light bulbs, incandescent light bulbs were pricey. You could get them inexpensively and you were just started saving electricity at home, light bulb by light bulb by light bulb. Then they started doing appliances and a variety of other measures, then so over time, the math on it, I don't know this year's figures, but from 2020, from 2000 when it started to like 2 years ago, Vermonters had invested through the energy efficiency charge $684 million. And I think the total savings.
Ratepayers that charge $684 million and you call that savings?
Yeah, because they saved 1.7 billion, I think was the answer, in terms of reduced energy costs.
And that's why we got the next to lowest electric fees in New England.
That's one of the reasons we've had declining electric use, and declining electric use saves us.
Yeah, now you're gonna convince us you could do that with fossil fuels. Is that what you think this thing's gonna do with fossil fuels?
Declining heating costs? Yes. Yeah, I would say people's heating bills are going to decline.
That you work, we have our work cut out. for us.
Yeah.
But you can't, last night with the caucus, and we need 20 votes for this thing, and we need some talking points.
Right.
This is, can't get away with that.
It's going to be, so I'm definitely open to schooling and assistance, how to report the bill in a way that addresses those features more effectively. Part of what we've been doing in the last 10 days is going back and forth between these two groups that are antagonistic to one another, the administration and the supporters, and looking at ways to address concerns that keep being raised. The biggest one of which is check back, and I think we are there on that, being able to satisfy.
Check back is a tool, not a.
Well, it's like a buzzword. I don't think most people have any idea what they really mean by we want to check back position, but we will be able to genuinely satisfy, I think, the need for any kind of check.
Who's the organized opposition on this bill? Who's funding it? Who's trying to cut this to prevent this reduction of fossil fuels from taking place?
The most organized effort I've seen so far came from a major fuel dealer. So
what's going to happen to the fuel industry if other states follow our lead?
Well, Mr. Cota said about half of his members are already evolving towards providing alternates to just selling fuel. I mean,
They're the ones that are going to survive.
I think, long-term, burning fuel is going to be, I think we already have seen it for decades. The amount of fuel sold goes down every year. So the writing's on the wall well before this bill that people are moving away from burning fossil fuels. And I guess every business will make its own decision about whether that's the only way they want to make money.
So if you're young enough, enterprising enough, forward-thinking enough, you're going to survive this.
I'd say yes. And I have a fuel dealer in my town that stopped selling fuel. And although the name is the same, all they do now are things like they still install boilers. They're installing only the appliances. They're not selling fuel anymore.
It's like a non-bank bank.
Did you already cover the check back piece, guys?
No,
It was discussed briefly.
That's like double inside baseball.
Well, I mean, the other part of that piece is, one of the things I've heard is that we're not being really specific enough with the check back, saying we're going to check back. And I'm just wondering if we could talk,
Sure. So we tuned up the level of detail in the reports so that it's actually going to be, I think, a challenge for the PUC to deliver these things, but leave that alone. There's a check back in February of 23, so the project will be roughly 4 or 5 months old, so we'll get to see how they're starting. We have an entire legislative session at that point to say, hey, you're going astray compared to what we thought. We could pass statute to adjust the program. They're coming back with a report that I think will be much larger and more developed in January of 24. Same questions about costs, measures, the whole thing. The program will be far more developed. We will have a chance for an entire legislative session to pass legislation designed to alter the program because we have concerns. One of the concerns that's now explicitly named is the affordability of the program, and are there adequate cost containment measures? So we'll be looking at the issue that worries some people about what will happen to regular folks under the system. Then the rule issues in fall of 24, prior to going into effect in January of 25, and LCAR will be reviewing the rule. We've added a very explicit intent section, so it gives the criteria by which LCAR will review the rule, and we've named affordability in the intent section. And then the committees of jurisdiction are required to evaluate the rule and then affirm to LCAR whether they support the rule or not. So we have LCAR plus committees of jurisdiction, all evaluating the final rule before it goes into effect. So that's the third check. And then I think sort of the ultimate check behind all this is that it's going to require an appropriation every year to continue the project. And we have the power of the purse.
So for those who say these checkbacks may not be checking in whether or not this is going to make sure that this new process is affordable. You feel those are in place?
Right. We're asking the affordability
What was
question.
unaffordable?
Right.
So
We're asking the
that's the,
affordability question 3 times.
Good question, good point, good point, good point. Good
So-
point.
Yes.
Good point.
I look at the check back is, the governor wants us to check back so he can, and then be able to say, I, the governor, want to be able to kill this thing if I, the governor, believe it's bad or it's a bad program or it's good politics for me, the governor, or for whatever reasons any governor would want to do it. And I suggested that we might think of a way where the legislature would have an opportunity to say, yeah, we've got the plan, we vote to keep moving forward. But if we were to give the legislature an opportunity to do that, up or down, to continue moving forward with the plan, can there be a structure where that's what the check back does? Or does the structure have to include the legislature has to vote to do it, and then the governor gets a chance to veto or not veto the legislature's vote? Rich?
I wasn't listening.
Yeah, so it's
So based on my research for the Senate Secretary, Mr. O'Grady, Mr. Chakowski, there's the whole problem of this legislature binding a future legislature to a particular action or vote. Well, I won't just say like, we can't wait that away.
no, we can't. So does the governor want to check back for the reason that folks would want to check back, which is to make sure that there's a general agreement we move forward? Or does the governor want to check back as an opportunity to stop it with his signature because he thinks it ought to be stopped?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. I'm not gonna speculate as to
If there
why.
were a way to say, we'll bring it back to the legislature has to vote and move forward, because that's a reasonable request. But it's a kind of a do-over for, we've already been through the veto stuff. Again, that be a super majority. That could be crafted if we thought that was a constructive way to do it.
Okay, well,
And that's what I asked for Rich is if this is a good idea, we're gonna move it forward, we have a plan, if people are skeptical, should there be a comeback? Or should the check back be an opportunity for someone who's trying to stop it to do it from a minority? They can't get the votes to stop it, to do it by their signature. Am I making sense here, Rich?
I can't answer what the governor would do and.
Well, when I know 6 different governors, and each one of them might do something different. So what would be correct? So I think that's a dilemma we have to solve, but it's not one that's gonna go away, so we've gotta move ahead one way or another.
I think the legislature, this vote is to affirm a plan of action that we have 3 opportunities to review and,
Steve,
3 opportunities.
should I ask?
Yes, please. We're generally masking, although I'm drinking coffee, so I've had mine off.
I understand.
My orientation to this is that while it's any prudent legislature will monitor the development and and consider any kind of course adjustments that it thinks are wise. We've named the criteria in the intent section and other parts of the bill about what constitutes a sound program. And we will have the opportunity, one of the 23 legislative session, the 24 legislative session, and rulemaking. So I know that makes you wring your hands. For me, that is an opportunity for us to responsibly monitor and engage and alter the course of the program. The question up front is, do we have the confidence to move this bill and say, we're adequately assured that those ways of monitoring what happens over time are sufficient to say, we're voting this once and that's it. Well, I've never seen a version that says you must, in essence, vote the same bill twice.
Hey, we're in a business where they try and sell horses. Hey, thank you for taking the time to try and get us more familiar with the many moving parts.
It's not
And
simple.
for keeping our noses to the grindstone. We're gonna go get it. When are we starting again?
In 5 minutes.
We're gonna get it. If I may go get a coffee.
Yeah, certainly.
And,
Is that gonna make you more energetic?
hey,
If so, maybe I would suggest an alternate beverage.
I got a list here that I made of people. Maybe we have time or.
I think it's 11.
No, then I'm missing one. I can't figure out who it is.
Maybe it was
See what you can do.
So, yeah, we'll be back on H492. Yeah, so we're still live. For folks who are interested in the next formal agenda item, we have H492 scheduled for discussion and testimony starting in 4 minutes. And H492 is an act related to the structure of the Natural Resources Board. So we'll see you maybe at 11. Film at 11.
Chairman, may I borrow a pen?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's like the pen graveyard. They just seem to accumulate.
You know, I hate to admit this, Mr. Chairman, but this late, I still do not envision what this looks like out in the world.
Right.
So we
So
have this very elaborate structure, this program. We hear about the program and how the program works and so on, but I'm looking at how people heat their houses in ways that don't trash the environment, and I'm not seeing the connection yet.
well, I'm going to consider this my #1 homework task for the week.
Explain how it works.
Well, yeah, to sort out a clear and simple way of, I'd like to put together some sort of visual that lets people see what's going on, as well as find simple ways to define why we're doing this and how this works and what we anticipate will happen. And, it's not a particularly good analogy, but it's maybe, I don't know. When Kennedy announced JFK announced in Houston that we were going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, we had not yet had any astronaut orbit the Earth yet. Yeah. So how he was able to articulate a goal that we were able to achieve, sometimes I think
I wouldn't make that comparison on the floor.
no, but that's one thing. I was like, there are times where this is actually.
Well, that was pretty easy to explain.
Yeah, putting a person on the moon was easier to explain than the bill. Sad but true.
And they did it with less computer
Right.
capacity. you and I carry in our pockets.
All right, so from the Department of Analogies, Senator Campion, you're in charge of that. Well, the other thing is we're starting from a system.
I think his advice was probably, how do you teach it?
Yeah.
How do you're gonna have a class of 30.
Yeah.
How do you teach it? And make sure people can then take that language and make it their own back in their constituencies.
Yeah.
That's what we're always doing. I mean,
Yeah.
and what is the problem that we're trying to solve with this bill? And that's usually wins the day.
Well, I mean, I understand that life isn't always simple.
Sure.
And that there are things that have to be complicated. But for me, and with any problem, the place we start, the perfect world involves a very simple, direct, tautological solution. Very simply, this is wrong, don't do that. I mean, that's the simplest. No, we're not going to do that here. We're not going to say to people, stop burning fossil fuel. It's tempting, but we're not going to do that, all right? And there, we probably need a system. But then starting with the simple tautological approach is the theoretical perfection. I'd like to be no more complicated than it has to be.
Right.
And at this point, we're the Natural Resources and Energy Committee, we're
Right.
discussing this bill, and we have really not talked about energy and energy use at all this morning. We've talked about the bureaucratic structure of the program. And
It's simple, challenging place we're starting from. It's as though we have a solid waste system where when you're finished with your trash, you walk to your border, your property line, and you throw it in your neighbor's yard. That's what happens. It's as though that's our solid waste system. And that's it. And we have no laws other than just throw your trash in the neighbor's yard, or maybe the street, your choice. And that's what we do with burning fossil fuels.
I know, you're right, yeah.
So, and there's no charge, there are no repercussions, or there.
Well, there are
There are
health repercussions and
Well, the current system,
climate.
right, there, but for some people, that relatively slow-moving, diffuse challenge is so hard to apprehend that it is tolerated.
Yeah.
All right, so, well,
No, that was a great discussion.
yeah,
It's very
thank you.
helpful, yeah.
So Senator McDonald, I'll be calling you this weekend to try out one or more scripts. All right, so we are still live and it is 9:30. Again, so we're taking up Bill H492 and activating the structure of the Natural Resources Board. And we have Representative Baumgart back in committee to help introduce the bill to the committee. So, our regular question, what was the challenge and how does the bill address it?
I don't know if that's our regular question.
Well,
Yeah,
actually, the longer version is,
What's
what
the,
challenge did you see or what opportunity did you see and how does the bill address it?
Okay. For the record.
I like to say, what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Yes, okay.
But that's so negative.
For the record, Representative Seth Baumgart's, the reporter of H492, a score member of Senate Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife Committee. So to get to the chair's question, a little bit of background. I'm going to just frame this, and of course, like I said, council will go through the details of the bill. Action 50 passed in 1970. I think everybody in this room would, I assume, would say save Vermont as we know it.
Sure.
And it was originally set up with a chair and 8 lay members, therefore a 9-member board. And system of district commissions operating sort of underneath the umbrella of the board. During the time that the board first enacted was in place, a lot of key case law was developed, be it the Queechee decision, the Southview decision, and others. And in 2004, for a number of reasons that we can talk about, the legislature eliminated the environmental board
and replaced it with a system where appeals went to the court. At the time, people were, there were obviously people for that and people against it. The sort of, if you will, the applicant community wanted to move to the system of the court for, to have it be more formalistic, more subject to things like the rules of civil procedure and just get a decision from a single judge.
Sorry, just so I keep my Act 250 history straight, which is a little fuzzy in places. So that original structure, chair plus 8-member board, was that referred, is it right to refer to that as the E-board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that was the E-board, and that was in fact from the passage in 1970 until 2004.
Okay, so for the first 34 years.
Yeah, 34 years.
Thank you.
Then the legislature switched it to having appeals go to the E-court. And so Act 250 was also, to back up a little bit in the history, it was designed to be a local process. It was designed to be close to the communities in which the proposed projects were being discussed. And so you have your district commissions, which are made up of people who live in the area. But when the E-board would hear a case, the E-board, an appeal, the E-board would come to the community in question and sit around a table in a Grange Hall and have witnesses come. And the process was formal enough, but not too formal. People in the audience felt like they had a voice and they could sit and listen. It was there for the local reporters were there. It was a locally focused process throughout. And now it's been removed to the point that you have to go to the court. And rather than having people sitting around a table in the Grange Hall, you've got a judge in a row or a bench, which is very removed from where the initial way that Act 250 was supposed to work and be connected to the communities.
So the E-board was in fact like the appellate body
Yes.
for
Yes.
appeals local design.
Yes. Quasi-judicial.
Yeah.
And the result of that has been, so you had, if you think about it as a pendulum on a clock, you had the old E-board, the original construct here. The pendulum swung all the way over here and lost much of what this was supposed to be about. There were reasons that people thought that needed to happen. They thought that it was, too informal. And it's also true, I think, that lay members, as cases got more complicated, and there were more rules, and reams and reams of pre-filed testimony. It was hard for lay members to keep up with that because they weren't getting paid. And it would take days and days and days of work to, so.
Sorry, just so I keep up with the details. So how did the E-board change to post 2004?
Yeah, okay, good. That's where I want to go to. It was eliminated. The Natural Resources Board was created, which is a chair and 4 lay members. But the board has, and here's the thing, we have lost our way because the board does not develop expertise. The old E-board developed expertise through the process of hearing appeals, and it created an umbrella with a drip line.
ExxonMobil calling.
Under which the district commissions operated. It developed detailed case law, and the real difference between what's going on with the court and what's going on with the E-board and what we'll talk about in a second with the replacement board is that when the old E-board heard a case, and especially if there were complicated issues and they were having to pull apart and figure out how to give life to one of the criteria, they would develop a careful construct that would then provide guidance for the district commissions thereafter and the whole process thereafter. That has been lost by the court because the court's job is simply to hear the evidence as opposed to and apply the law, and a decision comes out, but it's not done with the purpose of developing a construct and developing expertise within the system. It's a matter of deciding the law of that case.
So for instance, Queechee, Now we have the Cucci test, so that
Yes.
came out of the e-board.
That came out of the
thing.
e-board.
Here's guidance for all future decisions that relate to this question.
Yep. And that has, ironically, the cases that are, the case law that is still being used to guide the system was that developed by the e-board. And the Cucci decision, the Southview decision, and Ellen could name some others.
Can I ask one more quick question?
Yes.
So the guidance that came out of the e-board, was it case law, was it actual written guidance, or a combination of the two?
It was in the context of the decision.
Yeah. Okay.
But really developing it and then explaining it, why, bringing it down to that decision ultimately in the end.
Sorry, one more question.
Yeah, okay.
So we've been struggling for years over how to treat trails relative to Act 250. So this might well have gone to the e-board, and then they would have heard a case, issued a ruling. That ruling would have become guidance
Yes.
for how the district commissions would then interpret applications that involve trails going forward.
Yes, and or rules,
Yeah.
rulemaking, but the rulemaking would have come from a body of expertise built up within the body, and we don't have that. There's nobody doing that. There's no expertise.
On the board
On the board, on the board itself, yes, there is expertise among the staff.
Sure.
So what we're talking about, and to use the pendulum, go back to the pendulum again, was you had the much less formal old e-board. We had the complaints that arose from that, but we threw much of what that was supposed to be aside and let all the way over here with the clock pendulum. What we're doing with this is bringing it to the middle and taking the best elements from the two. Because to the extent that, for instance, the old e-board it got so complicated, it took so much time to prepare that people didn't have, weren't able to get through. We now are talking about a paid professional board. But it would hear the cases, back in the town where the case is taking place. But it's a paid board, 1 full-time, 4 part-time, so equivalent of 3 FTEs. We can talk about why we chose that construct. And it would therefore develop the expertise, recreate that umbrella that guides the entire system. While at the same time, with that expertise pulling the parts back into this from this side, if you will, that the development community was initially looking for, the applicant community was initially looking for when they wanted it to go over here. So we did a couple of things that I think are unique with the board, or not totally unique, but anyway. There's a committee made up of legislators to be the nominating committee for the board. They may only meet once a year or a couple. They meet anyway. So we have the construct is that there will be 5 members. Each member will have 5-year terms. They'll be staggered so that one term is up every 5 years. Removal only for cause. And they get onto the board through the process of the nominating process, so that there are qualifications enumerated. So people apply, the board looks and decides which candidates are qualified, sends those candidates to the governor chooses one of those each year. Of course, initially it will be 5 staggered terms.
So akin to judicial nominating.
It has some similarities.
Okay.
It has some similarities. Now, we thought about, in fact, we were initially thinking about the judicial nominating board, and they said no thanks.
It sounds a little bit more like the State Board of Education's role in appointing the Secretary of Education.
We actually used, as part of it, the cannabis board model.
Interesting.
So
May I just ask a quick question? What happens if the governor does not find any of those candidates appealing?
you can ask them those.
Same process as the state. Okay.
Yeah, same process.
Secretary.
So one little detail just to throw in here, this is that no 2 board members can be from the same county. Because this is supposed to be from across the state. It's not supposed to be, and I have, as I said on the floor, I have a lot of friends in the Burlington Montpelier access, a lot of friends there, so don't take it personally, but we want the rest of the state to be involved in this too. And we want the process to then go to the town in question.
And just so, because it's been so helpful to hear about the e-board as sort of a comparison, how did people get appointed to the e-board and how could they be removed?
The e-board appointments were simply made by the governor.
Okay.
And I believe they could be removed. I'm not sure if I'm right about that. I think they could be removed at any time. Is that true? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly the chair could. And in this case, though, we have it set up so that removal is only for cause. So over the course of a term, the governor's got, even a 2-year term, the governor's going to get 2 appointments. But it'll be, by the way, is one of the other complaints about the whole process is that it has become politicized, which, may or may not be fair, but in any event, this, we set up to make it as depoliticized as we could possibly make it, through the nominating process in the first instance, and then the removal only for cause, and 1 member a year.
Well, in a way, it reminds me a little of this UC, right? Part of the reason we have a UC, I'd say besides technical expertise, is that it depoliticizes some issues by keeping them out of this building, which is by nature political.
So I think that, just to go back to it, the real key here is building up a body of expertise. And people that are really going to have a lot of expertise for rulemaking and through hearing appeals. And the other thing is really quicker, by the way, because this is what the board will do, a lot of pressure. So when the case is ready to go, the board will be ready to go. So it's not the reason to do it, but it's a.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've sort of seen a similar evolution in the State Board of Education over the past couple of decades where, no offense to past members, but not everyone was as engaged in education issues or had education kind of experiences. And I think now that it's kind of where it's at now, they seem more engaged, doing more work, a little more efficient. Similar.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable with, one of our challenges in the state is we look to do so many things inexpensively that sometimes we ask more than I think is reasonable of citizens in terms of. So do you feel like the construct that you're putting forward adequately remunerates people so that they won't feel torn about putting in the time they need to put in?
Yeah, they are, the chair is full-time, the other 4 members are half-time. And frankly, I think they're potentially great jobs for people who are really interested in this, yeah. But adequately compensated.
Okay.
So by the way, we have a slow phase in. We have the board coming into appointments to be made by no later than June 30th of 2022, and the board comes into effect on July 1, 23. And then they don't hear, and that gives them time to do rulemaking, file a report that's due, and then they don't start hearing cases until July 1 of 24. So there's a 1-year lead up of the board getting itself organized, rulemaking, a report that we ask them to file, and then being ready to go. In the meantime, the old system stays intact. A case filed on June 30th of 2023 would stay with the E-Court. If it's filed on July 1, the board has kicked into, so board in effect July 1, 23, begins hearing cases July 1, 24.
I know that in earlier discussions about reform of process and governance, it included discussions around major and minor applications. Do majors get automatically referred up to this board?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, they don't.
This isn't changing these
Appeals,
things,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is just the board
This is
itself.
just the
This
board.
is not changing process at all,
Yeah,
correct?
no,
Okay.
yeah, we did not want to get into that because we think the commissions are capable of, they can handle a major, that's what they're for, in part. But then the appeals go to the board.
So that in terms of regular work, then it will be convening to hear appeals largely. Does it have the ability to be proactive? For instance, there may not be something happening on trails yet, but they know this is sort of a festering topic. they can just self-assign and take that on.
They can self-assign, take that on, there's a lot of this can be done through rulemaking. There's been no rulemaking done since 2015.
But can't that be done now as well?
Probably, but there's no expertise.
Okay, that, I just want to make sure what we're changing and what we're not, because this is one of those things where we're just looking at the structure, everything you're making says makes sense. If we're changing appeals, who's doing this work, who's doing that, it's going to get.
Thank you for saying that, because we kept this bill, we didn't get into criteria, we didn't get into anything, we kept it just focused on governance, on the theory that anything else we try to do is, with Act 250, is a lost cause until we've dealt with governance. You can't do anything until you have the governance right. So we focus just on the governance piece with this, thinking that that could make a huge difference.
All right. So it's always helpful. You've been through this process. Thanks for, I always feel like Act 250 is a vastly underappreciated asset in the state of Vermont. It comes up in the press 97% of the time. It's to sort of bash it as a problem, even though it's, I think, contributed in a irreplaceable way to helping keep Vermont, you know, whatever that sort of cute saying means. So it's great that you've been working on it. And I remember reading the Cucci decision. That was your father who was on. Was that who was on?
My father was on the board for a long time. I remember the kitchen table with all the materials laid out and trying to get through it days before
So I'm sure that in doing all this work, you've heard pushback on this. So it will be helpful to this committee. I'm not arguing to ask you to argue against this change. But what kind of concerns do you think they may hear, and how would you address them?
Yeah, one concern is, frankly, some people like the court system. You know, they're sort of comfortable working there. They think it has more finality, more formality, better protects the rights of applicants. I disagree, but that's the argument. The other, and by the way, is this notion of consolidated hearings, which happens very rarely, in fact, but the notion is that you can consolidate the appeal from a local permitting decision and the Act 250 decision, and somehow there's something gained by having those appealed together. But the problem with that is, number one, it rarely happens. But number two, so it doesn't happen enough to even come close to competing with the need for good governance, for setting up a system of real governance. But number two, the criteria are different. You have, just local permits have their own criteria, they have their own purposes, and you might be able to get some fact-based stuff on the record together. But the work of an appeal is in the preparation, and the work is, and then each of those are different. They have different. They're very often very different. So consolidating them, that was one of them. But it's kind of a red herring because it happens so rarely for a lot of reasons. Because a lot of times the applicants want to deal with the local permitting process first, get it that out of the way, and then do thinking. And there's other pieces. But so,
in your experience, by the time you've handled the local permitting, is that apt to resolve the Act 250 issues themselves?
I don't know if I can say that it does or it doesn't, but there are another way to answer the question, which doesn't quite answer it. Is that there aren't that many appeals. There are like 10, on the average of 10 a year. And by the way, one other thing I'll just throw in here is that we are already, and it's going to accelerate a climate haven. And that is going to put the kind of pressure on this state, or has the potential to put the kind of pressure on this state that we were seeing in the days when Act 250 was enacted. And we better be ready. And we're not ready. And this is
a great point.
And this is something, without this, we are not going to be ready.
I guess.
It reminds, right. The first version of this was the interstate was built.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, pressure arrived because you could get to Vermont much more easily, quickly.
And we are one of the most, we may be the most climate resilient state in the country. We're certainly one of them.
But that is the lead argument. That's terrific. Yeah. We're just now, right? We're seeing it now.
We're gonna hire you to do some PR work on the clean heat standard.
And the other thing is that we're a climate haven, but also the opportunities that are presented by electronic work from home, which makes it more attractive for someone wanting to
Yeah,
get out of town.
They get together nicely.
yeah, you're right. That is changed the world for sure.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
very helpful.
I heard the roll call, I guess I go figure out what's going on.
Sorry to have missed most of yours. That's
Mr.
not
Chair,
negotiable.
This guy loves that.
Yeah.
So you're in good shape.
I know.
when this committee entertained the 50th anniversary look at 250, the statements of purpose over and over again were to change and modernize and streamline and et cetera, et cetera. And this committee added, and to go back in Act 250 and to look at the things that worked well and make them available for reinstatement. And some of us looked at, some people thought that was a crazy idea. But that thread is in what we presented today.
I love the image of the clock pendulum. And we'll bring it to the middle and pulling the right pieces from the two together, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Senator McCormick?
Yeah, I had stepped out of the room. Did you get into the idea of when we're talking about appeals, we're talking about the courts rather than the e-board? That I can tell you as a chair, having chaired a district commission.
Yeah.
One way that I saw that a lawyer for opponents could hang up the project was by throwing out very exact legalisms. This is even without the court, which is the possibility, because you could eventually appeal to the Supreme Court if the e-board didn't give you what you wanted. So there was always the possibility that whatever I did as chair was going to end up before the Supreme Court. Is that a clever lawyer, I won't mention names, but Steve, you know who I mean, could take what ought to have been a 2-hour procedure and stretch it out for a couple of days, because I didn't want to err. I was aware of the record that I was making, because it's quasi judicial. And the result was I would call a recess, get on the phone to the state and talk to counsel before making the decision. And I would say sometimes, well, listen, this is quasi judicial. I'm going to emphasize quasi. This is the best I can do. And but the result is, I think it could become overly legalistic.
So thank you again.
Can I make one final point? I made it once, but I want to just sort of emphasize it again. One of the problems with the system as it is now is that as hard as they're working and as good a job as they're doing, the commissions are kind of adrift. And I don't say that in a negative way. What I mean is that there's no umbrella with a drip line. That's not there anymore. And that's why, to the extent it is fair to say that you get very disparate decisions from district commissions. I don't really know if it is or not. I haven't looked enough to really understand. But to the extent that it is, this creates the umbrella and it creates the drip line within which the district commissions will, because of that guidance that will come from a board which has built up expertise, developed rules and heard cases.
So there's consistency, but when you say drip line, that suggests that there's some distance between the two drip lines. And I'm just wondering if that means the local flexibility that it was designed to have at the outset is still retained, but you only go so far before you're out of bounds.
That's right. I think that's exactly right. It retains all the features it was supposed to have, but it does create edges and boundaries, like you got with the Southview decision, like you got with the Gucci decision.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mr. Kowski.
Just want to make a big plug for this large, beautiful binder.
Yes.
The Commission on Act 250, the next 50 years. Good morning, Ellen Chakowski, Legislative Council. The Commission on Act 250 did look at this issue about the board and governance. And in the report, they did recommend this model of going back to the e-board as the appellate body. There were some variations made in this bill that weren't directly addressed. But this was the model that was considered and approved or recommended by the commission all those years ago. So there's some more background information in the report if you're looking for some history and detail.
And we have 2 commissioners in a row.
We do. So I was, just wanted to put it out there. They did very hard work. They looked at a lot of different models. The model that's in 492 is almost exactly what they proposed. So that's also just a plug for this issue has been worked on a few different times since the commission's report came out. Okay, so I'm going to do the high level walkthrough. First, section 1 has a purpose statement. I think it summarizes what Representative Bongartz did just say. Section 2 has a lot of the important details on the structure of this new board. So as Representative Bongartz mentioned, first, the name of the board is changing from the Natural Resources Board to the Environmental Review Board. It is going to keep the existing powers of the Natural Resources Board, but it will be hearing appeals of district commission permit decisions and jurisdictional opinions. What that means is that the environmental court is going to retain the rest of its jurisdiction as well. So the environmental court is going to keep hearing appeals from A&R decisions and municipal zoning decisions. So this new ERB is going to be hearing Act 250 permit appeals and JO appeals. Okay. The chair is going to remain a full-time position as it is currently, and there will be 4 half-time members. Candidates are going to be sought that have 1 or more of the expertise in the following areas: environmental science, natural resources law and policy, land use planning, community planning, and environmental justice. There's also an interest in having the board reflect to the extent possible the racial, ethnic, gender, and geographic diversity of the state. And as Representative Bongartz mentioned, no 2 members of the board shall reside in the same county. The terms are going to be for 5 years, and they're going to be staggered terms. And then, as Representative Bongartz mentioned, this bill changes the model on how the board members are appointed. So it's setting up the Environmental Review Board Nominating Committee. This is modeled after the Cannabis Control Board and how that is currently appointed. So the nominating committee will post that there are open vacancies. Applicants will apply to the nominating committee. They will review based on those qualifications I just mentioned, and then they will submit the names of recommended candidates to the governor, who will then select members from the list. And there is advice and consent to the Senate, so you all will get to see who is being appointed. And as you mentioned, if the governor doesn't choose anyone from the list, the process will remain open until the governor has selected names to appoint. Members are allowed to be reappointed if they so choose. They are allowed to inform the governor they would like to be reappointed. However, the governor can decide not to reappoint someone if that is their choice. And as again mentioned, another change from the existing structure is that members of the board are removable for cause only, and that removal is by the other members of the board. And so the board is going to adopt rules defining the basis and procedure for removal. So again, currently the members of the existing board serve at the pleasure of the governor. This is a change. So section 3 establishes the nominating committee. It is a committee made up of 7 members. There are 3 members of the committee that are appointed by the governor to this nominating committee. They shall be executive branch employees, with at least one being an employee of the Department of Human Resources. And that was added because the Cannabis Control Board had an HR person on it, and they felt that it was very helpful having that expertise there as part of the hiring process.
Okay.
In addition, there are 2 legislative members appointed by the Speaker and 2 legislative members appointed by the Committee on Committees. And so it's a mixed group, 4 legislators and 4 executive branch employees. They will appoint their own chair. There's confidentiality in the process, but they will review and anyone not appointed, the names will remain confidential. The members of that committee have per diems. So yeah, that's the nominating committee. Section 4 directs the new ERB to adopt their rules of procedure for the appellate hearings. Section 5 describes the powers of the board. So it includes the existing powers from the existing board. It also adds that the board is going, in addition to the online database that has the Act 250 precedent already in it, the board shall publish its decisions online. And then section 6 allows the board to hire some additional permanent personnel that they may need to conduct here now that they'll be conducting hearings. It also formalizes that the board shall hire an executive director. Previously, for many years, the Act 250 board had an executive director. It was only a few years ago when the last director retired that the board, that position was not filled. And so the House Committee felt that by having an executive director, that would provide some balance. This is mostly an administrative position, supervising the administration and operation of the board, as well as assisting the board and employing staff and preparing the annual budget for the board. So more of an administrative role, so that the board can focus on its Act 250 functions.
Okay.
The section 7, so I missed the testimony that you had this morning, or are you about to have testimony on 446?
On 446, we did that already.
You did that already. So there's language in section 7 that I believe was in 446 previously, and it shifts that filing of applications, the district commission shall provide notice by electronic means to the parties. So currently the burden is on the applicant to provide notice to parties, and so this is shifting the burden to the district commission to do the notice. And it also allows for notice by electronic means, but still requires that notice be posted in the town clerk's office.
So I'm gonna flag that to reconcile it with 446. Ms. Stone just emailed us the most current version of the requested changes, so we can just do this, lay them out side by side and make sure they sync up. Thank you.
Okay. Section 8 establishes the procedure for the appeals process. And so it has a lot of the existing language that's in the appeals section currently before the court. These will be de novo appeals. And then one thing that Representative Bongartz didn't get into too much detail, but I think goes to Senator McCormick's question earlier, is that while there are not a ton of details establishing the appellate procedure, there is, however, some specific language about limits on pre-hearing discovery, specifically in relation to the use of expert witnesses and pre-filed testimony. So expert witnesses may provide pre-filed testimony, so, and only expert witnesses. Interrogatories cannot be served on lay witnesses unless ordered by the board. And parties may also not take depositions of any witnesses unless ordered by the board. So there is a limit on some of the formal legal discovery tactics that are used in more formal cases. And that the House is interested in doing that to make sure there is some protection for lay witnesses who want to participate in the appeals process.
Was that in the commission report?
I don't know if it was specifically.
I don't remember it.
Yeah.
It might have been.
Yeah, it wasn't. I think though that in hearing the testimony about the balance between completely informal board proceeding and legal system proceeding, the House did want to provide some limits, but also they do want the board to be also set some of their own rules. So this is just a few limits on the most sort of legalistic strategies. All right. So section 9 establishes that appeals of jurisdictional opinions go to the ERB. Section 10 establishes that the filing fee for appeals is $295. This is the same amount that is currently required to file an appeal with the Environmental Court and the Supreme Court. So it's consistent. Section 11 then amends Chapter 220 of Title 10, which is the Environmental Appeals section, and it strikes the references to Act 250 appeals before the Environmental Court. Section 12 also amends language for the Environmental Court, and it strikes the court's current ability to revoke Act 250 permits, because that will be also authority that the board has.
Do we keep the environmental court?
Yes, and they will retain jurisdiction over A&R appeals, enforcement, and municipal zoning appeals. Yep. Section 13. So now I'm almost done. Section 13 is the appropriation section. So it appropriates $384,000, which shall cover the cost of a new staff attorney for the board, as well as the 4 half-time board members, as well as the salary for the executive director. And then there are going to be some additional operating costs as well. Section 14 provides the transition section that says the governor shall appoint members of the new board by July 1, 2023. And any current NRB members that are not appointed, their term shall expire then. And July 1, 2023, all appropriations and existing employees of the NRB transfer to the new ERB. The ERB is going to need to adopt rules of their procedures by July 1, 2024. Section 15 is the transition for the E-Court, the environmental court. So they retain jurisdiction until July 1, 2024 over the pending Act 250 cases. And then section 16 has a report back from the new board. And it's looking at it's having the new board look at a number of issues related to Act 250 jurisdiction that has been in prior Act 250 bills. So having them look at location-based jurisdiction, how to use the capability and development plan in the Act 250 process, and then also looking at the current staffing levels of the board and the district commission, as well as looking at permit fees and whether they're sufficient to cover costs and if they're effective. And that language was added actually by the Ways and Means Committee who worked on this. Oh, and it also asks whether or not the board should be able to use build-back authority, because that has come up recently. Section 17 is revision authority, directing me to replace all the references to the NRB with the ERB. And then finally, the bill shall take effect on passage, except that the E-Court's jurisdiction shall take effect, jurisdictional changes shall take effect July 1, 2024.
Any committee questions? Senator Paul?
How do the functions of this board differ from the functions of the old environmental board? Are we simply returning to the board, or is it a different board?
I haven't read the old statute in a while, so I'll have to check, but I think largely, well, so there's a caveat. There were actually a few different iterations of the old board. There was a land use panel, there was a water resources panel. There were a couple different iterations where they split up the duties over time. But largely, I think it has most of the same duties. The E-Court, their jurisdiction has also changed over time. As originally enacted, they were only hearing enforcement cases, and the various panels associated with the E-Board heard the other appeal cases. So it's hard for me to give you a short answer, but it's fairly close.
Senator Campion?
So, Senator McCormick, you're talking about when Act 250 initially started.
Well, up
Sort of.
until, I think the present regime came about in the early 2000s.
Yeah, 2004,
2004, yeah. So up until
Up until
then,
that point.
yeah.
Great, that was the perfect walk. Thank you. With that, I'd like to invite.
I want to compliment Ms. Chakowski on her Vanna White presentation.
Holding it.
I'm a
Holding
big
it
fan
up.
of that binder. It's got so much good information. in it.
This gesture with the hand over.
There's another copy over here. so-
Yes, no, Senator McCormick and I wrote that, all the content in there.
You did. You worked very hard on it.
I remember you guys staying up late. It was so cute, working together. All right,
Now it's the guide for the future.
with that, I'd like to welcome back the chair, Chair Haskell. Thanks so much.
Thank
So
you.
we'd love to hear your take on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Bray and committee members. For the record, I am Sabina Haskell, and I'm the chair of the Natural Resources Board. With me by Zoom today is Allison Stone, our general counsel. I thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on H492. And as you know, you just heard from Representative Baumgart, co-sponsor of the bill. My comments reflect the administration's position on the bill, excuse me. In short, we do not support H492. Vermont is facing increasingly complex challenges. The profound demographic challenge for the state and the unfolding climate crisis presents Vermont, our people, the economy, and the environment an opportunity to modernize Act 250 to adjust to those anticipated pressures on our systems and guide future development, promote smart growth, and support a working landscape. We can and we should continue our state legacy of environmental protection through a contemporary, targeted, and efficient process that builds upon the many advances in planning and legal structures. Act 250 is too important to Vermont, its people, our heritage, and most importantly to our future, to not give it the comprehensive restructuring and forward thinking that it deserves. As the chair, when I talk about comprehensive reform for Act 250, it means a more predictable, consistent, and modernized program, one that addresses both policies, rules, and governance. And that's not what's happening here. making significant changes to the Act 250 criteria and jurisdiction without strengthening the fundamental operations of the NRB in a manner that supports uniform interpretation of new criteria and jurisdiction presents a risk both to the new changes and to the public support of Act 250 generally. The NRB, as you know, received over 500 permit applications in 2021. We issued 442 permit decisions. The incorporation of new criteria and an expected increase in Act 250 applications and jurisdictional opinions is frankly a daunting prospect. I've spent the last few months learning the organization that I'm now leading, and I'm looking forward to working with the team this summer on laying out a strategic vision and process improvements and modernizing our work. And so it brings me to addressing our capacity, which is stretched thin. In addition to being the new chair, we are also in the process of hiring a new associate general counsel, a new NRB technician, a business director, and we just finished hiring a new district coordinator and an enforcement officer who are undergoing full steam training and onboarding right now. We also just finished launching a new online database that provides much, much better applicant and staff usability. That project took, I think, 3 to 4 years to stand up, and our team is in the thick of learning this new tool and maximizing its utility. We're also about to undertake a huge pilot project with District 4, Chittenden County, and District 7, the Northeast Kingdom, to scan and digitize 12,000 paper files, an estimated 1.7 million pieces of paper, representing 4 decades of permit applications and decisions, and that's just for 2 districts. Act 250 has served Vermont's environment well for over 50 years, and as we look to the future, we will need to consider a myriad of challenges and needs. But we also need to take the long overdue fundamental steps to modernize our operations and bring them into the digital age, because that's how we all do our business today, online. And somebody mentioned that earlier about how we want to be able to do everything online. And lastly, although this isn't part of H492, my previous testimony to both this committee and House Natural Resources included some policy changes that are important to the administration, including the mitigation of ag soils at the airport, state-owned airports, accessory on-farm businesses, but most importantly, permanent exemptions for development in our designated areas, downtown, village centers, and neighborhood development areas. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about 492 and or any other things too. Thank you
very much. Do you have or can Ms. Stone send any of those changes that you were just mentioning at the end that you'd like to see incorporated? Is that something you've drafted?
I have not drafted that, no. We've discussed the permanent exemptions for downtown and those things in other bills.
Okay.
But we have not actually drafted language. Is that something that you would like us to do?
For this bill?
Well, no, I'm just saying, if
Yeah.
fairly often, if someone says, we would like you to consider putting something in,
Yeah,
they'll bring language, in,
Yeah.
especially this time of year.
I will
So
make
just
sure
wanted to
that
make sure if you already had it,
yep,
great. Just
I will make sure that
requesting it
happens.
necessarily, but if you have it, then it would be helpful for us to see it.
Yep.
I guess, so I'm having a little trouble sorting out the concerns over, one of them was that there's new criteria to enact, and I'm not sure that we have any new criteria to enact, so.
So there are criteria changes that have been brought up in other bills,
Yeah,
as you know. The policy changes that I talk about here are actually not new criteria, they're exemptions, which will make the process more streamlined and easier to implement.
Okay.
So perhaps I mischose the word criteria on
Well,
on
I
that.
just wanted to.
Yeah.
Try and get clear.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Right, and so one of the ongoing concerns, I think probably all of us have heard, was the different interpretations by different commissions, the consistency questions. So the construct that's being brought forward here, does it not seem like it might improve the consistency by having, this board issue rules and guidance that, and establish cases basically that provide guidance to the district commissions?
I think that having a better operating, more streamlined operating NRB will start that, and we'll start to have more consistency there because we can see things all in the same place. I don't know if Allison wants to
Mark.
add anything to that. Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, okay.
Mark.
Sure, I guess, I'm hearing an echo myself. Sorry. If the goal is to provide more consistency, I think there are a number of ways that you can do that. And the question is this, well, there are other ways to do that would include working within the existing structure. We do have rulemaking authority. The current NRB has rulemaking authority that could be used to provide additional guidance on the substantive application of our laws as they exist now. There could be other things like training that we implement without legislative changes at an administrative level that to promote consistency moving forward in the application of our law that wouldn't require a change in the governance structure and how appeals are heard.
I think Representative Bongart's testimony, if my notes are accurate, was that that the NRB had not issued rules since 2015. Does that sound accurate to you?
I know we are, I think it has been a while. I've been around close to a year. I know that I have inherited a draft of some rules that it has been a while, but that's probably, I couldn't confirm the year, but I think we're due for rulemaking, yes.
All right, well, okay, any committee questions for Chair Haskell?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much.
All right.
Very much.
Ms. Stone, did you have something you'd like to add?
Oh, I was just wondering, in terms of, I don't know if Chair Haskell has anything she wants to add in terms of sort of if this is the solution that that the legislature is looking to move forward with in terms of addressing the problems that, or the challenges to be addressed that were articulated earlier. A follow-up question would be just whether this proposal is, whether there are adequate resources to move within this proposal to move to an appellate structure that can provide that sort of consistency and case law that we're looking for. One thing that jumps to mind, just being an attorney, is that it looks like there's just one additional attorney that would be a staff attorney 1, which under the attorney pay plan is 0 to 2 years of experience, which is obviously that'd be somebody coming out of law school, and I know that would mean that they're lower on the pay scale in terms of the resources that would be dedicated to this, but whether that one additional entry-level attorney would be adequate to support this type of appellate board. And then I think our chair has some other, well, I don't want to put her on the spot, but in terms of whether the resources in the budget would be adequate to support this type of structure.
Right, well, thank you for that, because it's a constant theme in this committee that we don't want to ever ask an operating area to take on work without adequate support to take on the work well. Our goal is mutual, which is to see whatever work succeed, and the hamstring an effort by underfunding or understaffing is a recipe for disaster, really. I mean, it's just makes people miserable. So if you want, I know that you're not supporting the proposal, but because of your inside view of the nature of the operation, if you can help us re-examine that figure, and that would be helpful to everyone, because this construct will move forward. I don't know what its fate is ultimately, but certainly we want to make sure that the appropriations are adequate to support the level of activity that would help it function to everyone's, best, at their best level. So that would be a help to the committee. Thank you. Is that something you could submit to us?
We did, I'm sorry,
Oh, I'm sorry.
we did put together a note for House appropriations. 384 is the number, 384,000 is the number for this, for FY23. The JFO predicts somewhere just over 615, I think, for outgoing years.
Is that because there's a partial year to set up?
Yeah, but just to look at the calculations of salaries and everything, we've walked through it, and I think it's closer to $1 million, and we're already $500,000, and we have a deficit, is what I should say, because the 4 part-time board members should be paid, in my opinion, on par with the part-time board members of the PUC. And they earn, with a conservative estimate of benefits, $167,500 each year, and they work part-time as well. And that includes benefits, I did say that. You're gonna need at least 1 attorney, if not 2. The PUC has 7 attorneys. The executive director salary is $160,000. And there's also been some language in there about potentially looking longer term about whether we need to restaff and have individual offices for each of the districts. So a district coordinator makes about $125,000 with benefits. These are all with benefits, $72,000 for a district technician. And so it adds up.
Yes. Okay. Well, could you share that note with us?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that, appropriations, when this bill gets there, will be asking us to weigh in, and we'll be looking for a fiscal note, and I think it would be helpful to have those numbers vetted. Frankly, as we went through the bill, 384 struck me as a surprisingly low figure for how many people were going to be supported. And I think it also might be helpful to Ms. Stone's point to be pointing out the level of experience for the attorney that you think would be helpful. Someone who's new to the area is probably going to have a steep learning curve, as opposed to someone who can assist the board because they're already familiar with the law. It's my guess. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that additional testimony. Very helpful. Anything else you want to share? Senator Camp.
May I get your email address?
Sure.
Yeah, I just need that for follow up on a few things.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Is that all right?
Of course.
Okay. Sorry to take committee time. It's all related, and I just don't want to lose that train of thought.
Well, we're concerned about Bennington Second Airport too.
Well, I do have some.
Senator
Sears and I have some 250 stuff related.
Oh, we're talking about Bennington Airport?
No, Sunderland things. So.
Sunderland, my old hometown.
Your old hometown.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I'm going to forward you some things.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Do you want to introduce your draft amendment now? Exempting?
No. It's nothing like that. I just didn't want to lose the thought.
Okay.
Well, the chair was here. Thank you.
So we are right on schedule. Are there any committee questions? So we have one other guest in the room. Do you want to speak to the committee? Is that your hope?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Stephen Ramus. I serve as chair of the environmental board. I serve as district commission, district coordinator, chair of House Natural Resources Committee, and also as a member of this committee a good while ago.
Okay.
And land use law is what I do. It is the only legal work that I do.
Okay.
And I'm representing both applicants and.
So why don't you join us at the table, introduce yourself,
Thanks.
and put it on the record. If you can try to be brief, that will be good, because we're trying to take a little break. We're mostly going straight since the bell rang this morning.
What I was gonna request,
Yeah.
having given my introduction, is that I would like the opportunity to, I've taken notes here and think about some of these things and be a witness to the committee. I do support the bill.
Okay.
Next week at a time that works for the committee. I'd like to reflect on what I heard
Sure.
today, and I realize you have other things obviously on your schedule today.
Okay, well, yeah, I think this is, I call Act 250 our development DNA, so we don't want to be rushing when we're talking about something as critical to the state as this. And so I appreciate your participation, and we will schedule time to have you in next week when we won't be quite so pressed for time.
Great. Thank you. When I was chairing House Natural Resources Committee, Senator Art Gibb, who was a key founder of Act 250, was my counterpart, and he and I, communicated a lot. And I think I have a good sense of the history and why things worked and so on. And I also, I do environmental law. I've done some things in the E-court, and I think I have a good comparison of how the two work.
Well, institutional knowledge is really helpful when we look at how something, everyone comes in here year after year trying to change things for the better. And it's good to understand how we got to where we are. So what years were you serving in the House and chairing?
That was in the 1980s. I served 3 terms in the House. Then I was elected to the Senate from Windsor County, and I served just 1 year in the Senate because Governor Cunin appointed me to chair the Environmental Board, which I did for a couple of years.
Yeah. So you came to the House and you were what, 14 years old, 15, 16?
Well, I'm older than I look, I guess.
Right. Well, thanks very much for coming in, Senator McCormick, and then we're going to take a break for 10 minutes.
Mr. Reyes and I were running mates in the 1988 election, which he won and I lost. And then when he took that appointment, he recommended me as his successor, Governor Cunin, appointed me on Steve Reyes' recommendation.
So
It's a nice story. I like.
Yeah.
You're going to be buying him lunch today? Is that what you're saying?
I could do that.
All right. So thank you, everyone. We will take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to resume
Good to
work.
see you.
And when we come back, it's on surface water withdrawals and interbasin transfer.